You ever ride a bike that just feels stronger than it should? Same size engine, nothing special on paper, but the second you roll on, it pulls harder than everything around it. That's not luck, and it's not marketing either. There's a reason some engines hit way above their weight, and most riders never get told what it is. Today, we're breaking down the engine trick that can change everything about how power is delivered, what you're actually feeling at the throttle, and why some bikes leave others behind. Stay with me till the end, because this might save you from wasting money on the wrong upgrades. The engine trick. What's happening comes down to something most people never see directly. It's not about making the engine bigger or forcing more into it. It's about how cleanly the engine moves air in and out, and how precisely that movement is timed. When the intake is tuned to the right length, air doesn't just enter, it arrives with rhythm. When the exhaust is shaped and timed correctly, it doesn't just push gases out, it helps pull fresh air in behind it. That pull creates a cycle where each movement supports the next, instead of fighting it. Timing ties it all together. The moment valves open, the moment they close, and the moment ignition happens, all have to line up with that moving air. When they do, the engine stops working against itself and starts working as a complete system. The result is not louder or more aggressive on the surface, but far more effective underneath. Nothing about this adds parts or increases size. It simply allows the engine to use what it already has with far less waste. That is why the difference feels so immediate and so real. You are not adding power in the way most people think. You are removing the barriers that were holding it back. Once you see it, you start noticing where it's missing. Why you were told the wrong story. For a long time, the story was simple. Bigger engines made more power, more displacement meant more strength, more presence, and more authority on the road. That idea didn't come out of nowhere. It was built on years of machines where size really did make a noticeable difference. That belief stuck because it was easy to understand and easy to sell. You didn't have to think about airflow or timing or how an engine actually used what it had. You just looked at the numbers and assumed the larger one would win. Most of the time, under normal conditions, it did. Manufacturers leaned into that because it worked. It simplified buying decisions and kept expectations predictable. Build something bigger, and it would feel stronger in ways people could recognize immediately. It also left less room for questions about what was happening inside the engine, where things were far more complicated. Over time, that idea became the default way people judged performance. It shaped how bikes were marketed, how riders compared machines, and how expectations were set before anyone even turned the key. The problem is, it only tells part of the story, and not the part that explains why some machines break the pattern. And that belief hides what's really going on under load. If you're into real mechanical truth, and not the usual surface-level talk, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And share your take below, because experienced riders always see things most people completely miss. The moment it stops making sense. The shift happens when real experience starts pushing back against that belief. You ride something that should be average, but it isn't. Or you ride something that should feel dominant, but it comes up short. The numbers say one thing, but the road tells you something else entirely. At first, it feels like a one-off. Maybe the bike was tuned differently, maybe it was lighter, maybe the conditions were just right. But then it happens again and then again. Different machines, same kind of mismatch. Expectations don't line up with reality the way they are supposed to. That's when you start paying closer attention. Not to what the brochure says, but to how the bike behaves over time. How it pulls through the middle, how it responds when you roll on, how it carries speed without feeling strained. You begin to trust what you feel more than what you are told. That tension between expectation and experience forces a question most riders never think to ask. If power isn't coming strictly from size, then where is it really coming from? And more importantly, why do some machines seem to access it so much better than others? That's where you start asking the right question. Before we go further, there's another piece most riders overlook. How your bike is set up around the engine changes how much of this you actually feel. I've put the gear and setup that helps unlock that in the description. How much you're actually using. Most engines never use everything they already have. That's the uncomfortable truth. What you feel at the throttle is only a portion of what the engine is capable of producing at any given moment. Think about it in simple terms. Every cycle has potential, but not every cycle reaches it. There is always a gap between what could happen inside that cylinder and what actually happens when you ride. That gap is not small either. In many cases, it is the difference between an engine that feels average and one that feels sharp. You can see it in machines that look identical on paper but behave completely differently on the road. One feels restricted, like it is holding something back. The other feels free, like everything is being used. That difference is not about adding anything new. It is about how much of what is already there is actually being accessed. Most riders assume they are getting everything the engine can give. In reality, they are often using far less than that. The rest is sitting there, unused, because the system is not set up to take advantage of it. That is where the real separation begins, not in the size of the engine, but in how much of it is being used at any given time. Because what's missing isn't power, it's access. The pull you never see. Inside the engine, there is a moment most people never think about. As gases leave, they do not just exit quietly. They move with speed and direction. And that movement creates a low-pressure area behind them. That low pressure acts like a pull, helping draw the next charge in. That pull is not random. It is shaped by the path the gases travel and the timing of when they leave. When everything lines up, the outgoing flow helps the incoming flow instead of working against it. The engine begins to assist itself, cycle after cycle, without adding any extra components. You do not see this happening, and you do not hear it directly. What you feel is the result. The engine responds quicker, builds speed more smoothly, and carries momentum in a way that feels effortless. That sensation comes from the system, working together instead of fighting itself. Most setups never reach that point. The pull is weak or mistimed, and the engine ends up doing more work than it needs to. When it is right, the difference is immediate. It feels like the engine has found a second layer of strength that was always there but never fully used. But that force only works when everything lines up perfectly. Where everything can go wrong. The same system that creates that smooth, strong pull can fall apart with small changes. That is where things become sensitive. A slight shift in timing can turn a strong setup into something flat and unresponsive. It does not take much. A small change in when something opens or closes can move the entire effect out of sync. What once worked together starts to clash. Instead of helping each other, the different parts begin to interfere with one another, and the result is a noticeable drop in performance. That is why two setups that look almost identical can behave very differently. One is aligned, the other is slightly off. To someone looking at it from the outside, they seem the same. On the road, they are not even close. This is also why guessing rarely works. You cannot just change one piece and expect everything to improve. Each adjustment affects something else. And without understanding how they interact, it is easy to lose more than you gain. When everything is in sync, the engine feels smooth and strong. When it is not, the engine feels strained, like it is working harder than it should. That difference comes down to precision, not size, not cost, and not complexity. And that precision is exactly why most setups never go this far. Why it's not built this way. If this kind of performance is possible, the obvious question is why it is not standard. The answer comes down to priorities that go beyond pure performance. Engines built for everyday use have to last. They have to run through thousands of miles without constant adjustment, pushing, Everything to the edge might feel better in the short term, but it reduces the margin that keeps things reliable over time. There are also limits placed on what comes out of the engine. Those limits affect how aggressively it can be set up. To meet those requirements, compromises have to be made. The system is tuned to stay within those boundaries, even if it means leaving some performance unused. Cost plays a role as well. Precision takes time, and time increases expense. Building something that works consistently for thousands of riders means simplifying where possible. That simplicity often comes at the expense of peak effectiveness. When you put all of that together, the result is an engine that is stable, predictable, and durable, but not fully optimized for what it could be at its best. It is designed to work in every situation, not to excel in one. So what you're riding was never meant to do this in the first place. The difference you can't ignore. The first time you feel it, you don't need anyone to explain it. You roll into the throttle, and the bike answers immediately. No hesitation, no waiting, no feeling like it needs to catch up. It just goes clean and direct, like everything is working the way it should. It is not about noise or speed on paper. It is about how the bike responds to you. A small twist feels like a bigger move. The pull comes in sooner and stays with you longer. You do not have to fight for it or chase it up the rev range. It is already there when you ask for it. You notice it most in the middle. That space, where a lot of machines feel flat or lazy, suddenly feels alive. The bike carries itself forward with less effort, and you find yourself using less throttle to do the same thing. It feels smoother, but also stronger, like it is no longer holding back. That kind of response changes how you ride. You stop planning around the bike and start trusting it. Passing feels easier, merging feels more natural, and holding speed takes less work. It is not dramatic in a flashy way, but it is undeniable once you experience it. That is when you realize something was always missing. Why bigger doesn't always win. For years, the idea was simple. More size meant more power. That belief made sense because it worked often enough to feel true. Larger engines did feel stronger in many situations, especially when you were dealing with weight or long stretches of road. Then you ride something smaller that pulls harder where it counts, and the idea starts to crack. It does not replace everything you knew, but it forces you to question it. If size was the whole story, that smaller machine would never feel the way it does. The difference shows up in how power is delivered, not just how much there is. A bigger engine might have more on paper, but if it feels slow to respond or heavy in its movement, it loses that edge in real use. The smaller one, when it is set up right, feels quicker, sharper, and more willing. You start comparing not just numbers, but behavior. How fast it responds, how smoothly it builds, how easily it carries speed. That is where the gap becomes clear. It is no longer about who has more. It is about who uses what they have better. And that leads to a harder truth most riders never hear. If this changed how you look at power and what your engine is really doing, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We're breaking down the kind of details most riders feel, but almost nobody takes the time to explain clearly. Power you already paid for. Once that idea settles in, it becomes hard to ignore. You realize that some of the performance you thought you needed to buy was already there. It was part of the engine from the beginning, just not fully used. That changes how you look at what you have. Instead of thinking about what is missing, you start thinking about what is being left behind. The bike you ride every day may be capable of more than it shows you, not because it is hiding anything on purpose, but because it was never set up to give you everything at once. There is something frustrating about that realization. You put your money into a machine expecting a certain level of performance, and then you find out there is more sitting just out of reach. It is not broken, and it is not weak. It is simply not being pushed to its full potential. At the same time, there is something satisfying about it. Knowing that the strength is already there changes how you think about upgrades and changes. You are not chasing something new. You are uncovering something that was always part of the design. But getting that power back isn't free. The trade-off you can't escape. Every gain comes with a cost, and this is no different. When you push an engine closer to its full potential, you also push it closer to its limits. The margin that keeps everything smooth and predictable starts to shrink. You feel it in how sensitive everything becomes. Small changes matter more. Conditions matter more. What used to be forgiving becomes precise, and that precision demands attention. The bike may feel stronger, but it also expects more from you in return. There is also the question of longevity. The more you ask from any machine, the more it has to handle over time. Parts experience more stress, and the system as a whole operates with less room for error. That does not mean failure is guaranteed, but it does mean the balance has shifted. For some riders, that trade makes perfect sense. The added response and strength are worth the extra care. For others, the original balance feels better, even if it leaves some performance unused. Neither choice is wrong. It comes down to what you value more on the road. And once you understand that balance, the whole industry starts to look different. Why nobody explains this clearly. Most people never hear this explained in a straight line, and that is not an accident. The way engines actually behave under load is not simple, and it does not fit neatly into quick explanations or easy selling points. Dealers are not going to walk through it, and most marketing never touches it. It is easier to talk about size, numbers, and brand identity than it is to explain how a system works as a whole. That kind of detail takes time, and time does not always sell. There is also a skill gap. Understanding how all of this connects requires experience, not just reading. It comes from riding different machines, noticing patterns, and paying attention over years, not weeks. Without that background, the conversation feels complicated and easy to skip. Because of that, the deeper explanation rarely makes it into everyday discussions. It stays in smaller circles, shared between people who have taken the time to see it for themselves. For everyone else, the simplified version continues to dominate, even if it leaves out the most important part. That gap between what is easy to say and what is actually happening is where the silence comes from. Not a deliberate cover, but a combination of complexity, habit, and convenience that keeps the full picture from being widely understood. Over time, that silence becomes normal, and most riders stop asking deeper questions. They accept what they are told, even when their own experience suggests there is more going on beneath the surface than anyone is willing to explain clearly. And that silence creates opportunity, but not for the rider, who benefits from that silence. When something is not clearly explained, it becomes easier to shape how people approach it. Performance can be broken into steps, and those steps can be sold one at a time. Each change promises improvement, even if the full picture is never shown. That approach keeps things predictable from a business standpoint. Instead of delivering everything at once, performance is spread out across stages. Each stage feels like progress, and each step feels necessary, even when the starting point already had more potential than it seemed. It also builds dependence. If riders believe performance only comes from adding more, they continue looking outward for solutions. Parts, upgrades, and changes become the focus, while the underlying behavior of the engine stays in the background. This does not mean anything is being done with bad intent. It is simply how the system has developed over time. Simpler explanations are easier to communicate, and incremental changes are easier to sell. The result is a cycle where understanding stays limited and demand stays steady. Once you recognize that pattern, it becomes harder to look at performance the same way. What once seemed like a clear path starts to look more like a controlled process, where access to potential is managed instead of fully revealed. You begin to question what is being offered, what is being held back, and why certain limits always seem to exist, even when the machine itself feels capable of much more than it is allowed. to show. And once you see that pattern, you stop looking at engines the same way. What experienced riders do differently? Experience changes how you approach all of this. Instead of chasing numbers or following trends, you start paying attention to how a machine behaves in real conditions. The focus shifts from what is advertised to what is actually felt on the road. You begin to notice which changes make a real difference and which ones do not. Small adjustments that improve response or smoothness stand out more than big promises that never quite deliver. Over time, you build a sense of what matters and what can be ignored. That also affects how money is spent. Instead of jumping from one upgrade to another, decisions become more selective. The goal is no longer to add as much as possible, but to make changes that work together and support the way the engine already operates. There is also more patience. Understanding takes time, and so does getting things right. Rushing into changes often leads to disappointment, while careful adjustments tend to produce results that last. That difference comes from knowing that performance is not just about adding more, but about working with what is already there. With that approach, the entire process becomes more controlled. You are no longer reacting to what you are told. You are responding to what you have learned through experience. And that changes everything about how you see performance. It stops being about chasing trends or copying setups, and starts becoming about understanding behavior, feeling differences, and making choices that actually improve the way your machine works where it matters most, every time you ride. And it all leads to one final realization: what power really means. After all of this, the idea of power starts to look different. It is no longer just about size, numbers, or what can be added. It becomes about how effectively what already exists is being used. Engines have always had potential built into them. The difference has never been whether that potential exists, but whether it is being accessed. Some machines reach closer to it, while others stay further away, even if they look similar from the outside. That realization changes how you judge performance. Instead of asking how much an engine has, you start asking how well it uses what it has. That shift removes a lot of confusion and replaces it with a clearer way of understanding what you feel on the road. It also brings things back to something simpler. The connection between rider and machine becomes more direct when the system is working the way it should. There is less resistance, less delay, and less effort needed to get the response you want. In the end, power is not about creating something new. It is about removing what gets in the way. It is about allowing the engine to operate as a complete system, where each part supports the next, instead of holding it back. That is the difference between chasing numbers and understanding what you are actually feeling when you ride. Once you see it clearly, you stop looking for more and start using what was already there all along. That is why the difference feels so real when you experience it. Not because something extra was added, but because something unnecessary was taken away. You don't ride numbers, you ride how a machine responds beneath you. What we uncovered isn't about chasing more, but understanding what was already there, waiting to be used. Once that clicks, every bike feels different, every choice becomes clearer, and every mile carries more meaning. The road hasn't changed, but your understanding of what's happening beneath you has. Now you know the difference isn't always about more engine, it's about using what's already there the right way. And once that clicks, a lot of bikes you thought you understood start to feel very different. Some feel stronger, some feel like they've been holding back the whole time. That's the kind of insight most riders only figure out after years on the road. If this made you see things differently, hit like and subscribe for more real, no-nonsense breakdowns like this. And I want to hear from you. What's a bike you rode that felt way stronger than it should have? Let's get that conversation going below.